Hello and welcome to today's episode of Authentic Achievements, where it's my absolute privilege to be joined by the fabulous Aang Lakey. Aang, welcome.
Thank you so much. So happy to be here.
Oh, I'm so looking forward to this, and already was enjoying our chat before we came on. So conscious before we get stuck in, as we already have, let me share a little bit more about you with our audience. So Aang is a dynamic coach, a fierce advocate, and an international speaker renowned for bridging disciplines to advance equity and prevent violence through the integration of consciousness and leadership. Drawing from a background in social work, violence prevention and human relations and organisational development, Aang integrates principles from various fields to redefine leadership practices. Their innovative approach empowers leaders to navigate complex challenges with clarity and ease, whilst fostering psychological safety, collaboration, and belonging. Aang's expertise in addressing biases and promoting interconnectedness enables them to design practical strategies that drive transformational change. As the founder of Increasing Consciousness, Aang is committed to creating conscious communities through inspiring leaders. Amazing. I mean, what an inspiring journey. And I think we do need to have more of that connectedness, more of that intention in what we're doing. But before we get into all of those, could you share more about your journey so far and maybe a pivotal moment that significantly shaped your leadership philosophy?
Yeah, absolutely. I think my journey has been, I don't even know the word to describe it, but I am such a believer in the universe, and only maybe for the last 20 years where I have faced my life with a profound knowing that everything that happens in our lives happens for a reason. And it started, I think, after the loss of my best friend when I was 17. I lost him, and he was the one person in my life that brought any positive meaning, any kindness, any compassion. Mostly because I grew up in severe poverty. My parents were in and out of jail, and I was consistently homeless. We were being evicted and moving a lot. And so he was the first person that really brought any consistency and any kindness to my life. And I lost him. And I think it probably took me somewhere between 5 and 10 years to really understand that if that hadn't happened to me in my life at the moment that it happened to me, then everything would be different for me in my life. And so I think that was my really profound moment of clarity, of fully trusting that everything that I've been through in my life has led me to the person that I am now, and will lead me to wherever it is that I'm going in the future. And so I think, my childhood adversity and going through that, losing my best friend when I lost him, and the struggle that I had to go through internally with the guilt and the shame, and navigating what am I going to do with my life now, and taking that into my own internal journey of, figuring out who am I, why am I here, why did I survive, and what is my purpose, and probably in that time frame of really trying to explore who am I and what am I here to do, I really had to learn how to settle my mind and to settle my body. And I did that through various things: meditation, yoga. I was really big into running for a long time because I had so much energy in my body that I needed to release. And at the same time, I was also working in the violence prevention field, doing crisis work, and seeing the impact of individuals being harmed every day, and trying to advise leaders on what they needed to do and how they needed to support survivors. And ultimately realizing it, through my personal and my professional journey kind of happening simultaneously, that they needed to be the role models for the team. They needed to be the role models for the organizations. I've grown up in the government, and so I was in the Army for 16 years, and then I've been a federal civilian employee, working with all of the branches of the military, now working with the Department of State. And so it's been a long journey of really trying to understand. And I think had I not been going through all of those things to understand for myself how I needed to increase my consciousness, how I needed to like settle my body and to settle my mind and to find purpose and meaning in that, then I don't think that I would have found for myself the internal understanding that I needed to make the connections between consciousness, emotional intelligence, diversity and inclusion related things, and violence prevention, which is now what I teach leaders about. And so I think my personal journey has been the impetus for me to be able to open my own mind enough to understand. And I'll share a little bit more as we get into it, but the socialization that we all grow up in and what we're taught to believe and who we're taught to believe it by impacts us, and having to navigate that as leaders is difficult, and having to help others navigate that as leaders is just as difficult.
Wow, I mean, what a journey you've had, and I'm so sorry about the loss of your friend. I can't begin to imagine how much that must have impacted. And I think you're right in what you say. One of the things life's taught me is that it only really makes sense in the rearview mirror. So when you look back and go, that's why I needed that and that and this to happen, or that's where, what those parts were, and that actually our biggest journey is the journey inward back to ourselves, isn't it? To look at the parts and see whether or not they still make sense, because I often will share this with people. I grew up in a place where, it was like sticks and stones can break your bones, but names can never hurt you. And yet we know now that is not true. And so many other little sayings like that navigated your way of thinking and your way of being and believing. But actually, when you go back and really look at them against your value set, you can go, well, I don't believe that anymore. that doesn't fit, that doesn't work. But you have to take that leap, don't you, to look inward and face that fear that actually you really are the cause of everything that's gone right and everything that's gone wrong, because they're all here to help you shape your journey.
Yeah, it's such an interesting dynamic to look back with hindsight, and especially now as I've had to talk a lot more about it to people. And for me, it seems easy enough for me to say that the worst thing that ever happened to me, the loss of my best friend, was the single most defining moment of my life. And had that not happened, I honestly don't even think that I would be alive today. I think that just like the majority of the people in my family, I would not have lived long. I would have, and if I did live long, I would have either been incarcerated or addicted to some sort of substance and not living a meaningful life. And so I think, that journey of navigating who we are, and I'm going to be honest too, I've been through so many versions of who I am that sometimes I question my own self. And even now, after being through so many versions of myself, I can look back and I can see that's the person that I needed to be at that time. And it's such a powerful thing. And I was talking with a good friend of mine. We've been friends since high school. And she's seen so many versions of who I am. And now it's kind of funny to laugh about. And she's like, you went from being this person like in the backwoods of Texas to being a really liberal hippie Vermonter. And now you're in DC and you're doing these things. And then you moved to Poland and you were there for 2 years. And so it's so interesting. But I am navigating some things in my life right now. And the one thing that I keep coming back to is I know that whatever is happening to me right now, there's a purpose behind it. And I just need to figure out, how do I learn from this? How do I grow from this? And how is it going to help me become the person that I need to be in the world? So, yeah.
It's so true. And I think everything in life is either a lesson, a blessing, or sometimes both. And in those moments where I'm not feeling blessed, because life does like to give us a plot twist, doesn't it? And make us continue to evolve. But when I look at what is it I'm supposed to learn here, like that's where the gift is. But you've got to keep looking for that, haven't you? You've got to keep clinging to that. And some days you've got to be kind to yourself and go, I know this is meant to help me grow, but right now I can just be really upset that it's happening to me. I'm still going to look for the lesson. I'm still going to look for the growth, but actually I'm going to give myself the grace and kindness to go. And it's okay to admit it's hard and it takes effort and navigation, because I think often when we're thinking about those consciousness pieces and that intention, there can be a fear of being able to go, I know it's not for me, but right now I just want to say, ouch, this actually hurts. And we need to be able to do the balance of both of those, don't we?
Yeah. And I think this area, for me, resilience is a mindset, and it's a way of being and living in the world. And personally, I don't think you can get into that mindset and into that way of being unless you have raised your consciousness to a certain level. And when I talk about raising consciousness, it's about your own self-awareness. It's also about your awareness of others and your awareness of the interconnectedness of the globe. And so, like, you have to have a foundational set of beliefs in terms of what do you believe and how do you believe it to be true. And I call that like consciousness is raising. And so when I think about consciousness, I think about it in terms of knowledge, practice, and competence. And so what is the knowledge that we need to have as our baseline, and what is the practices that we need to do in terms of like building our resilience and creating our mindset and maintaining our mindset and those kinds of things. And so it's definitely a complex task, I think, but it for me has been one of the most beneficial things that I've ever done, is exploring that consciousness, for lack of a better word.
I love that, because it's about being intentional, isn't it? And becoming curious about self. And it reminds me of I read Oprah Winfrey's book, What Do I Know for Sure? And that was one of the questions that she was asked actually by somebody she was interviewing many years ago. But she says she uses that regularly, which is, when she's in a place where maybe it's spiraling, she pulls herself back to what do I know for sure? Because that helps her to consciously find the facts that are sitting within there, the knowledge base, as you so eloquently put, that's needed to be able to be truly conscious. And I think sometimes it is, isn't it? We find that one phrase, we find that one question, that one element that allows us to reground ourselves in those moments of, for me, for want of a better term, sometimes overwhelm. I'm trying to be conscious. I'm trying to be intentional, but what's going on in my life is it wants my attention. And sometimes I need to find that thing that's going to allow me to reground, to not let the emotion run away with me. Is that how you found works to really help us remain conscious?
Yeah, I think, like all things in life, there's a balance between being and doing. and so we have to find our own presence, and we have to be able to be in that presence regardless of what's happening around us. And it's one of the hardest things that I've ever learned to do. And I'm going to be honest, I don't always do it well. But finding ways to stay in that state of being while everything around us is happening. And, for me, I've been a doer my whole life. I promised myself that I was going to make changes and that I was going to do something positive and meaningful with my life. And I've constantly been doing and doing and doing and doing. And I did not find what I was trying to do until I had that balance of being, of like pausing and asking myself the hard questions and exploring and navigating everything that I needed to navigate from within. And I don't know if maybe this is overly spiritual for your audience or not, but it's for me, there's definitely a balance between the being and the doing. And obviously it takes the mindset, it takes the body awareness, the emotional intelligence. It takes a whole number of skills to be able to navigate the being. And in my work with people and leaders specifically, it's one of the rarest skills that I have been able to see, is people not knowing how to be at the same time.
That it's such a good point, because I think sometimes I was definitely guilty of this. I was an avid doer and an avid doer for other people. So I would do everything else versus look at what I needed, and look at whether or not I was even taking care of myself, and I catch myself in doing that all the time, even now, going, okay, you haven't eaten again all day, and yet you have baked cookies for everybody else. You've done this because it would come and run up to Christmas, and it's like you're not taking care of yourself, and yet you're saying to my little girl, absolutely, it's important that we eat regularly, that we look after ourselves, that we take care of ourselves. And I'm saying it and I'm not doing it. So I sometimes have those reminders, but I think it is that, and you're right, I've worked with lots of leaders over the years, and there's almost a drive to constantly be doing, well, as long as I'm doing something, then I'm doing okay. Whereas actually just being comfortable to just sit and be with yourself, flaws and all, and to find the ability to love and appreciate yourself, flaws and all. Doesn't mean to say you're not going to try and work on the flaws. So we go, okay, I still need to grow and evolve because that bit, still isn't working. But that journey to be able to accept, acknowledge, and be with yourself is one of the hardest journeys, isn't it? But one of the most rewarding.
Yeah. I think, I don't really know how to articulate it, but I think from many people's perspectives, slowing down and trying to be is where they encounter the parts of themselves that they don't know how to work with. And they get scared and they back away or they run away. And of course, those are the most critical areas that need to be addressed in order for them to find balance or to find purpose, or whatever it is that they need in their lives. And I can't speak for everyone, but for myself, the only way to get through it is to be with it. And from someone who has had so many emotions, positive and negative and neutral, emotions, that sitting with the negative emotions really, I don't know, pushes the boundaries or makes you question who you are. And especially as in the spiritual world, not a lot of people want to think about how hard it is when you have all of these negative emotions or emotions that you're not supposed to be holding on to. And it's interesting because some of my friends in the spiritual world, there's a lot of talk about the vibrational frequencies and needing to make sure that you're as much as you can being in a state of joy and love and those kinds of things. And from my own personal life, I've managed and carried a lot of guilt and shame, which are the lowest frequencies. And navigating my own inner being when I find myself reflecting on negative emotions and tying that back to shame. And as an example, I grew up in severe poverty, and I've had weird issues with money since then, even though I've consistently made more than I ever need. And, I'm at the point in my life and in my business where trying to make it to the next level. And the realization there is that there's a financial aspect of that. And, it's one thing to make a couple $100,000, and it's another thing to make a couple $1 million. And for whatever reason, I have not been able to break that barrier from my own mental and intellectual like blocks that I have about what does it mean for me if I make that much money, and what does it mean for who I am, and what does it mean for my character, and all of these things that I know that block is there, and I know that I've been struggling with that for the last 3 years, and navigating from a spiritual journey, like none of that is actually really important. And it doesn't matter how much money you make, and it doesn't matter how much you do for the world, and all of these things, but navigating that core negative emotion, I think, is really difficult. And especially for people who want to do meaningful work, trying to dig in and to sit with some of those things and to navigate some of those emotions in positive and meaningful ways is really hard to do.
That's so true. And forgive me, the dog decided to join in. So, but he's now hopefully going to be quiet with us. But I think, I mean, you're right that we do put these barriers, or we have these barriers that are within us, that, you know, we kind of used to hold ourselves back, don't we? Use as a reason to like not go through, not always consciously. Yeah. So sometimes, you know, it's not until we sit and look at them that we can see, oh, it's still there, and it's been there, that maybe I'm not worthy of this, or why do I think I should even have a chance of that, or does that mean that I am, you know, becoming too materialistic? And as you say, none of those things are important. We're kind of here on our journey, and the only thing that, for me, the most precious thing that there is in the world, the one bit that no matter how much money and how much stuff you have, that you cannot get more of, is time. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, one of the things that and in fact, I have it here. I read a book. It was by Stephen Bartlett, and he talked about the fact about being conscious, and every now and again turning the hour clock over and being really present for that time, and going, if this one, my last hour, is this how I'd want to spend it? Because it really helps you to realize some of the things that you're doing that just aren't going to matter, and you're wasting precious time that you wouldn't get back. You know, I feel much richer now than I did many years ago, despite the fact that actually I don't earn as much or have as much stuff, but I do have priceless things that I wouldn't give up for all the money in the world. Like, I get to take my little girl to school, I get to pick her up from school, I get to have a time with her every day that's just the two of us, and it's like, she's not going to want that forever. So yeah. You know, I can't expect her to want it when I want it. It's like, you've got to put it in now. But I think it's reframing suddenly what success looks like for you, and realizing that's an inward journey to success, isn't it? Not an external, well, I should do this because that's what society says is successful. Yeah.
Well, I love it.
But I think, I mean, I love all of the stuff that you're doing. But I guess for me, you know, obviously through your work, you emphasize the importance of consciousness, equity, and interconnectedness in leadership. But could you share with us some practical habits or practices that leaders can adopt today, that not only overcome the challenges, but also create those environments where people thrive? Because I think often, you know, we can share that there's a challenge, we can share that there's something that could be solved, and then we leave people not knowing how to get started, and that's sometimes the worst part, isn't it? It's like, how do I start? What is something I could do today that would move me forward on that journey?
Yeah. Well, I will say that this is a lifelong journey, and the majority of individuals that I work with, it's long term. You know, at least 6 months to really dig into some of the practices and some of the behaviors that I believe are relevant and necessary to kind of find that balance between being and doing. And I will say that there are 3 things that I talk with leaders about that are kind of the foundation of this. And reflexivity is the biggest thing. And you talked about intentionality earlier. That's the second thing that I talk with them about. And the third thing that I talk with them about is congruence, living in congruence with the person that you are and the person that you want to be. And I do that help them to understand that through the context of building their community. And so I'll give some examples of what I mean by this to help with that practical, what do I do right now to help me get there? And so when I talk about reflexivity, it's a cycle of self-awareness, self-evaluation, and self-adjustment. And a lot of times in leadership courses, they talk about self-awareness. They may get into the self-evaluation, but they almost never talk about the self-adjustment. And the self-adjustment is the actual most important component of that, because it doesn't matter what knowledge we have and what insights we have. If we don't act on that knowledge and act on that insight, nothing changes. And so the self-adjustment portion is the most important component of that. And so the first thing that you have to do is you have to set up a foundation or a framework of how are you going to implement reflexivity into your life, and how are you going to bring self-awareness into your daily routines? How are you going to bring self-evaluation into your daily routines? How are you going to bring that self-adjustment into your daily routines? And I wrote an article on, I think it was on Brains Magazine, that defines some of the 10, what I think are the 10 best practices. And it talks about things like meditation, mindfulness practices, journaling, gratitude practices, emotional check-ins, body check-ins, and those kinds of things. But really, it's about integrating, bringing intention to this and integrating it into your daily routines. And so there's no one way to bring self-awareness into your life, whether you want to do that through meditation, through some sort of other mindfulness practice, whether you want to do it through journaling, whether you want to do it through therapy, whether you want to do it through some other means. You need to find the means that works best for you. And so what is the way that you like to share? What is the way that you like to explore? And what is the way that you like to contemplate on those things? And so finding what is that mechanism for you to raise your self-awareness. And then also thinking about it from what is the best way for me to self-evaluate, and can I self-evaluate, or do I need outside sources right now? A lot of times in the beginning, people can't evaluate themselves because they don't have the right frame of mind to be able to step back and to say, this is what happened. These are the emotions that I was feeling. I could visually see that they were experiencing this, and this. And how did that interrupt the dynamic? Most people are not able to do that, especially in the beginning. And so if that is the case, how can you bring evaluation into your process? And sometimes it's a mentor, sometimes it's a coach, sometimes it's a significant other, sometimes it's a friend. But how can you bring that evaluative process into your life to help you look at what's happening from an outside perspective? Because without understanding what is happening, if I don't know that when my heart rate increases, when I start sweating, or when my face turns red, or when my hands start shaking, if I cannot acknowledge those physical cues, emotional cues, mindset cues, then who can I bring into my life to help me? And I had to have a partner in my life early as I was navigating this, to be like, you can't even see what's happening to you right now. You need to slow down, And so who is that person for you, or what is the process that you need to do for yourself to objectively look at those situations and those circumstances? So obviously it depends on where you are in your process. And the third thing, that self-adjustment, how do you practice every single day to make adjustments based on the insights that you've learned? And so if you've learned, for me, I struggle with irritability. I have a head injury, and irritability is one of the worst symptoms that I struggle with. And so when I get irritable, and I notice that I'm getting irritable, I can pause and I can say, why are you getting irritable right now? There's no reason to be irritable. I can say, take a deep breath, go for a walk, like remove yourself from the situation so you don't inadvertently hurt someone else, and for me, my struggle was with my partner. I would get irritable for no reason, and I would have to navigate that. And so learning that I had to find ways to step back and to pause. Right. And so my partner was the one who was giving me that evaluative criteria that says, like, you get into these states where you can't even see the truth, and like when you're in that state, you act in a way, like you raise your voice and you get you show people that you're annoyed with them, and like, I know you, and I know that you value kindness and you value compassion, and so you're not acting the way that you've told me that you value. You know, like for me, like that was the hardest thing for me. It was like to acknowledge I am acting in that, like in a way that is not in alignment with the person that I am. And then now what do I have to do? And so that self adjustment is every time I find myself in that situation where I'm getting annoyed or I'm getting irritable, I have to say, like, this is not the person that I want to be. And I can't even tell you the number of times I've been on calls with customer service people and I've had to be like, so sorry, I know that this is not your fault. I'm experiencing some frustration right now and I need a pause. And so, yeah, like this kind of evaluative or self adjustment process is key. And we can't do that unless we bring attention to it.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I'll bring attention to it and also build a community to help us hold ourselves accountable in that process. And so I'll pause there since I've been going on a little bit.
I know, I love that. And I think you're right. I think we have to, we sometimes have to have people outside of us because we can't see our own blind spots for the reason that we're blind to them.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes you need people to shine a light in that dark corner so you can go, oh, I need to look there. I hadn't thought of that. But also such great advice about the fact that if we don't keep making the adjustments, nothing changes.
Yeah.
You know, without change, there is no change. I think they're the bits that often we don't get that far. I could literally talk to you all day, but I'm conscious that we're really close to time and I've still got a couple of things to ask. Can I ask, you've shared so much about your journey and the insights and actionable stuff that we can use to take away. But if you could go back and give your younger self a piece of advice, what would it be?
Oh, that's such a good question. And one thing is coming to my mind right now. I really wanted to say something about raising my consciousness and that being kind of the single most important aspect of my life. But I think instead, what I want to say right now is to trust the process, to trust, even when you don't want to trust the being, being in the being. And you know, when I talk about it with leaders, I talk about it from presence because that's a term that they can understand and they can sit with a little easier. But you know, find your presence and trust the process in that.
I love that. That's such great advice because we often don't find where we really are supposed to be, and until we find it, we can't be with it, we can't sit with it, and we can't be, you know, we're always going to be in a conflict, aren't we? So Aang, can you share with us who you help and how they can get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I work primarily with leadership teams. And while I do offer workshops and educational sessions around many of the topics that I've worked in my professional career on, so diversity, inclusion, violence prevention related areas, I primarily work with leadership teams. And the best way to contact me is anglakey.com or increasingconsciousness.org. And so one is my speaking profile, anglakey.com. It's got all my speaking stuff, my media and press kit and those kinds of things. And Increasing Consciousness is my company website. And so it's got all of the different ways that we could work together in terms of coaching, consulting, educational sessions, and those kinds of things.
Amazing. And I'll make sure that the details of all of that are in the show notes below. So if you're desperately scribbling down now, please just have a look at the show notes and all of that will be there for you to be able to access and get in contact with Aang. Aang, it's been an absolute delight. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your journey and giving us some really actionable ways to be more conscious.
Thank you so much. I'm really, really excited to be here and to share.
Bless you. And to everybody listening and watching, I hope that you found it equally insightful and inspiring. And until next time, goodbye.